Welcome to our Competency Management webinar series. In today's session, we're going to focus on how you can stay ahead of the retirement wave. This is going to be through what is the retirement wave, what operational impact will this have on your organization, and then what can we do about it. Before we get started, a bit about me. My name is Tom White. I'm the Product Manager for Kahuna, our Competency Management solution. At Hula Partners, I've been with Hula Partners for 5 years now, started in our consulting team, and then over the last 3.5 years moved into our technology division. Every day since, I've been focused on how competencies can help drive your different talent management and operation initiatives. So what is the retirement wave? When we talk about the retirement wave in this context, we're going to focus on baby boomers. Put it simply, they're the largest generation in US history. They make up for 1/4 of the US population. 30% of the workforce are comprised of baby boomers, and of that, over half of those positions are leadership. So really important group of individuals here. And the interesting thing is that they're coming up to the retirement eligibility age. So we have a biggest portion of the workforce now coming up to where they can leave the workforce and pursue other activities. This is obviously going to be concerning for a lot of companies for a number of reasons that we'll cover soon. But just think about knowledge transfer. You have all these people in senior positions holding key knowledge about your organization that could walk out the door. How can we mitigate that risk and drive future development? So just to dive into the organizational impacts that the retirement wave can have, we break it down into 3 big buckets. So the loss of critical knowledge, and that's something I just mentioned. So the proportion of people within your workforce who are baby boomers, generally in leadership positions, both on the managerial side, but also in the technical side of your organization. Most of our clients and a lot of organizations out there, before we work with them, have really bad knowledge transfer initiatives. How do they get that knowledge out of the heads of these senior people and down throughout the organization, and do that on a consistent basis. So rather than always having to team people up, how can we just more mechanically push that through the organization? This also means we have reduced mentoring and coaching opportunities as well. So talking about development, you generally look to your leaders in the technical and managerial space to mentor and coach these people up through the organization. So when you think about succession management, obviously that's something we need to focus on when it comes to the retirement wave. But if you have these people leaving your organization even now, some of your best mentors will be leaving too. So how can we, again, more systematically take that process away from just conversational, and then you put it into a system, define that knowledge, and so on. And then finally, something that's incredibly important, often overlooked in this space, is the loss of relationships with customers. Again, being senior members of your company in leadership positions, these guys are going to have key relationships with customers. Once you lose this individual to pursue other activities, are you at risk of losing this customer as well? What are you going to do to make sure, again, that that's pushed into your company and you have coverage and mitigations in place? So something to look at here on the top right of the screen is a survey conducted by Career Partners International, where they asked a number of organizations about what is the likely effect of retirement on your organization. So I think a lot of this makes sense. The top one being loss of knowledge and experience, which just makes sense, right? Your most senior employees in leadership positions leaving, a lot of knowledge and experience will be lost too. Shortage of skilled workers as well makes sense, but also this is a double impact. We've all read studies on the gap coming out from colleges and younger individuals in certain skill sets. So if you're not getting that supply of workers into your organization for specific skill sets, and you're losing what you already have, obviously this becomes even more important. And then we have some others around service delivery, which obviously impacts your customer's experience, competitive edge, and even increasing in costs. Something that we want to focus on in this session on top of that is the oil and gas example, which is pretty acute because of a couple of compounding factors. So first of all, this industry already went through something similar back in the late 80s, the big shift change. That was back in the 80s. There was a dip in oil and gas prices. People retired, people left the workforce, and there was already this gap of employees. And this gap of employees is now 20 to 30 years later, is now in your positions one step below leadership. So if you lose these key leadership positions because of retirement in oil and gas, they have a gap beneath that. So they have a lot of younger workers, a lot of senior workers, but not too many people in the middle. So that's a compounding factor of how retirement can impact your organization. The other compounding factor is the dip in oil and gas prices we're seeing today, which is just expediting this process of people leaving the workforce. Often it's a forced change for the organization where they have to scale down their workforce, looking at some of the more expensive employees who are probably more senior, been with the company, hold this knowledge and experience, the skills, delivery abilities, and so on. So it's just a compounding effect that's being seen in oil and gas today rather than in a few years' time. So where does this really impact in the different streamlines of oil and gas? So upstream being the biggest impact, with the number of workforce that this will impact in the next two decades being over 300,000, which is the size of a small country. So obviously, again, something that really needs to be focused on. Okay, so what can we do about it? Before we dive into that, the underlying thing that we can do to really drive this forward is to put processes in place and a framework in place that manages this process. And for us, that is competency management. So the idea that competencies can really drive these processes that we'll cover in the next screen. So we need to get our foundation in place. So what do we mean by competency management? We mean it's the entirety of assigning, assessing, and tracking the knowledge, skills, abilities, and experiences to perform specific activities. So this is a broad definition. So it can really be driven by job task analysis, understanding everything that you need to do your job well throughout the organization, and documenting that and being able to assess against those competencies, find your gaps for those competencies and to develop them. Competency management also helps to distinguish high performers throughout your organization. So when we come to succession management, for example, competencies is really the most effective way of defining who are these top performers that we should focus on when some of the more senior leadership positions might disappear over the next few years. Studies shown, I think there's a Bersin study that shows that competency management is actually more effective at identifying high performance than performance management. So that's an additional thing to think about. And then finally, as you can see on the diagram on the right, competency management really drives all of your talent initiatives. It becomes the foundation, that currency that integrates these processes together and acts as that measurement piece that you can flow throughout the process. So it's really important for the retirement waves. It's really important when it comes to operational delivery, operational effectiveness and capability, but also when it comes to talent management. So you can kill a few birds with this one stone of competency management. So tactically, what can we do about it? Once we understand that there's a problem, how it's impacting us, the fact that we feel competency management will be the foundation to drive some of these initiatives, what can we actually do? So we've broken this down into 6 different areas, and I'll go through each one now. So firstly, recruiting. How can we drive more effective recruiting to get the people on board quickly, as you see in point 2, to shorten that onboarding process, to scale up the individuals so we can close those gaps between the retirement wave folks in your company who are in the leadership positions with the skills and knowledge to these newcomers. So when it comes to recruiting, one of the key things you can do here is run an analysis of your company and find out what are the key competencies that are really moving the needle when it comes to performance and operational effectiveness in different positions, and then recruit based on those. So if you know that these are the 5 areas that really are driving an impact on your organization, make sure that that's integrated in the recruiting process, so you know that you can measure people against these key performance indicators. When it comes to onboarding, understanding that you've already recruited based on these key competencies, you then have a out-of-the-box development plan of how to scale up this individual as quickly as possible. On top of that, you can then drive training in the context of their job quickly and to the fingertips of the new employee. So again, if they know that they have a couple of gaps based on their interviewing process, there's training that can move the needle in these gaps, then you can push this to the user even before they start doing that training and understanding, so they can scale up quickly. Moving on to succession planning, two things to focus on here when it comes to retirement wave. Understanding the risk of losing these people. So not only the classic talent management, risk of loss, impact of loss, and so on like that, but a bit more detailed of what are we losing from a skill, competency, experience perspective. So outside of the person, really break that down into what are you losing and what do you need to, what is important out of that skill set, that experience set that you need to replace. So really just bring in succession planning down to a more granular level. And then when it comes to identifying the population of people that you want to succeed, driving that again from competencies, do talent mining based on their overall assessment history, their skill history, their experience history, not just basing it on managers' opinions of people, but really what they have been proven to be able to do. The 4th one here is a really big one, just knowledge transfer processes. So make sure that you have the ability to sit down with these experts, understand what they do, why they're so effective, what materials do they use to become so effective, and catalog that into a competency library with resources. And then that brings it out of having to have this individual speak to everyone within the company, which would be very difficult to do, and then you have it digitalized on a platform where they can access it in their own time. On top of that, as we said before, these guys are key mentors. So if you can identify them using the means that we've already discussed, in the cases that it makes sense, these guys should be speaking to the right folks in the workforce. Retention planning. So make sure that after these guys have left the organization, see if you can keep them on maybe as a contractor for a bit longer. Just because they retired doesn't mean you have to lose their knowledge, skills, and experiences on day one. Maybe you could have them on a part-time basis, maybe as a consultant coming in, and again just trying to get some more time and knowledge out of those folks. On top of that, retention planning for your current workforce as well. So obviously, if you're going to naturally lose some of your workforce due to retirement, it makes it even more important to keep the folks that are in your company that are high performers that can take up that mantle. So when it comes to retention planning, there's obviously quite a few mechanisms out there for you to use in compensation and so on. But there's also lots of studies, including a Bersin study in 2016 that shows for especially younger workers, career development is one of the great retention tools. And career development is best suited to having a visible, transparent competency framework behind it. And then finally here, something I've already touched on is the idea of contingent workers, which means that you don't have to lose this person on day one when they retire. Maybe there's different ways you can engage with them. And on top of that, studies have shown that 40% of the US workforce will be made of contingent workers, which is a lot. So you need to make sure that you're using this flexible liquid workforce in the right way to run specific specific problems for you. So if you lose people based on the retirement wave, how can you leverage this contingent workforce, this gig economy, to really fill those gaps? Okay, so I'm just going to leave you with a few takeaways before we wrap this up. So takeaway one, there's no stopping the retirement wave. It's happening. It's just a matter of demographics and time. So the key takeaway here is just that you have to understand it's going to occur. You need to understand the impact that's going to have on you, and you need to plan for it. On top of that, number two, if you plan for the retirement wave, it doesn't have to have a negative impact for you. You can really use it to your advantage and put in place the right career development, knowledge transfer initiatives to drive it for now and for future generations. Competencies will be the foundation of these programs. Again, it defines the currency of development that you need with your organization. What are the KSAs and experiences that I need in these positions? Who has these? What are the potential gaps? How do I develop towards them? This is just 101 of how you can close these retirement gaps. Identify your specific competencies that maintain a competitive advantage. So there's lots of reasons to have a competency framework in place, career development, understanding your organizational capability. But on top of that, boil these down into key areas that really move the needle again on operational impact. So recruit based on those, run some specific KPIs based on those, and so on. And then finally, be creative. How can you get the most out of your workforce? One rule doesn't apply to everyone. You should come up with your own initiatives and drive some competitive advantage out of how you solve for this problem. Okay, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions or you need some more information about this subject matter, please reach out to us.